There are a lot of places around the world that you can go for a hike along the beach with the waves gently lapping against the shore. But Nova Scotia is one of the few places anywhere in the world where you can actually hike on the ocean bottom. Twice a day, the water comes in here and is so deep that it is above your head. Fish are swimming, boats are sailing, but at other times, it is dry and hikeable. The Bay of Fundy is where I'm on my walkabout today. I've timed my hike to leave just after high tide. The people at Whale Creek Campground gave me permission to leave from their property, but there are other spots you can start, including from Walton Harbor. I'll be traveling from Walton to Tennycape. The distance depends on the actual route, as there is of course no marked trail on the ocean floor, but I'm expecting it to be around 14 kilometers. The reason I'm departing immediately after high tide is so I can begin my journey on the outgoing tide and maximize my time and safety. My goal is to reach the mouth of the Tennycape River and the wharf on the bay there before the tide comes back in. That may seem like a long time, but it's easy to get sidetracked exploring on this hike. And if you get stuck, in most places the only way out will be straight up a cliff. With the safety considerations of this hike settled, it's time to get at the history of this area. For most of this hike, I'll be traveling past Walton and East Walton. Now, back in Walton Harbor, which is just beyond that point there, there's a lighthouse, the Walton Lighthouse, which was built in 1873. And believe it or not, by 1950, Walton Harbor was the second busiest port in Nova Scotia. They were moving through all kinds of things, minerals like barite and manganese and gypsum, as well as pulpwood, all headed out from these shores. For much of the 100 or so years the light operated, it had two large wicks lit with kerosene and magnified with a Fresnel lens shining through a brass lantern. In essence, the Walton light was a large kerosene candle, the kerosene being the identical fuel that was popular for some time in home oil lamps and space heaters. The original light was red. In 1915, the red light was removed and the light became a white light with a Fresnel lens added. Instead of the light turning itself, a black screen would revolve around it, creating a pattern where the light was visible for 10 seconds, then dark for 3 seconds, visible for 4 seconds, and dark again for 3. That pattern was then printed on nautical charts. The unique pattern would allow mariners out in the bay to distinguish the Walton light from others in the area, such as the light at Burnt Coat Head. The black screen rotated on a clockwork mechanism that had to be wound each day by cranking a handle 60 turns. Walton Harbor ceased commercial operations in 1978, and the light was extinguished in 1986. In 1991, the municipality purchased the lighthouse. They declared it a heritage property, and it has since been declared a provincial heritage property as well. With efforts by the community, the lighthouse was restored, a park was created with hiking trails, even a small museum. The Walton Lighthouse is the last original lighthouse surviving in Hants County. The village of Walton is named after James Walton Nutting, whose middle name Walton was his mother's maiden name. Nutting was a lawyer and politician born around 1787 in the nearby community of Kempt. Like so many arriving at the time in Nova Scotia, Nutting's father, John, was a loyalist who came here after the Revolutionary War. Today we know this area as East Hants, but at the time of Nutting's birth, Hants, which had been formed in 1781, was made up of the townships of Windsor, Falmouth, and Newport. Walton was called Petite Riviere, a name given to it by the Acadians before their expulsion in 1775. Kempt would become a township in 1824, and Petite Riviere would be renamed Walton in 1836, eventually becoming the township of Walton in 1856. Petite Riviere was not an uncommon place name in Nova Scotia in the 1700s. In fact, there is still a community by that name on the South Shore. Now, To have a community renamed for him, you can imagine that James Walton Nutting was a very influential person. Records show that he went to school at King's Collegiate in Windsor from 1804 until 1810. Now that school actually still exists. It's a prestigious independent school in the area. In October 1810, Nutting was admitted to the bar and began work in the office of William Thompson, who at the time was the prothonotary of the Supreme Court, basically a chief legal clerk. He was also the clerk to the government. Nutting would take over this role unofficially 1 year later, but would not be officially appointed to the role for 23 years in 1834. He kept the job until he passed away in 1870. Unlike many people who ended up with communities named for them, Nutting was unusual in that he was not a prominent soldier or someone with tight connections to the crown, or even a well-known politician. What Nutting became known for in the early 1800s was his work with the church. He first began attending St. Paul's Church in Halifax and was recognized as one of the best educated people in the congregation. He joined a group who didn't like the cold, formal services of the Church of England. And when their choice of rector was rejected, they left St. Paul's and ultimately formed Granville Street Church, what is today known as First Baptist, in 1827. The Granville Street Church was located where Mountain Equipment Co-op now exists in downtown Halifax. From there, the church moved to Spring Garden Road, to where the Doyle Building is currently located. After a fire there in 1941, First Baptist moved to their current home on Halifax's Oxford Street. Well, the tide has certainly gone out a long way since I started this hike, and back in Walton Harbor, at high tide, the water depths can range from anywhere from 4 to 8 meters. And at low tide, the harbor is dry, and it can be dry as far out as 2 kilometers. Just like the retreating tide, the story of James Walton Nutting is not over yet. More on that and more of the ocean floor after the break. I'm on the floor of the Bay of Fundy. I'm hiking from Walton to Tennycape. And I'm doing this as the tide is headed out. You can see it is quite a distance out now. It is still retreating. My plan is to make it to Tennycape and the wharf there, or where there used to be a wharf anyways, before the tide is all the way back in. This place is home to the world's largest tidal range, and it's absolutely impressive. But it is incredibly important to watch the tides and the timing if you're going to do this hike, because you may have noticed as I've been traveling that the only way out in most cases is straight up a cliff. And so you want to make sure that you are off the ocean floor before the tide comes back in, because when it comes back in, it will be well above my head. Getting back to the story of James Walton Nutting. After leaving St. Paul's Church and the Church of England, Nutting is recorded as being the first person to be baptized and converted in Halifax to the Baptist faith. His Granville Street Church effectively launched the Baptist movement in Halifax, which had been to this time focused on the Anglicans and Catholics. In 1828, he was a delegate at the meeting of the Nova Scotia Baptist Associations, where it was decided a school should be formed to educate potential Baptist leaders. The Baptist Education Society was formed to lead the endeavor. A site was chosen in the valley near Horton, and a teacher was hired in 1829. Nutting was on the management committee, and he saw the need for something bigger. He wrote letters and columns in the Baptist Missionary magazine, a newspaper he helped edit, and traveled raising funds for an institution of higher learning. Eventually, in 1839, Queen's College opened. Queen's College was named in honor of Queen Victoria. Now, at the time, there was Dalhousie University, which had been created as a non-denominational school, but had come under the control of the Church of Scotland. King's College was under the control of the Church of England. And much like the refusal to appoint a preferred rector at St. Paul's, King's College refused to appoint a Baptist as the chair of classics, and that was the impetus for the Nova Scotia Association of Baptists to decide to create their own school. And so Queen's College opened with 29 students. The Queen's College name was changed to Acadia in 1841, a short time after opening, in recognition of the history of Acadian settlement in the area. Acadia College granted its first degree in 1843 and became a university in 1891, Acadia University. It wasn't until 1966 that the Baptist denomination relinquished its control over running the school. Nonetheless, the Baptist Convention of the Maritimes still appoints 9 of the university board members. Acadia University today is without question among Nova Scotia's and Canada's top schools. Nutting, over his life, was involved in not only Acadia but also Halifax's King's College. Nutting was respected for his integrity and passion for the Baptist movement and education. Among the many honors he received and committees he served on, King's College, the Anglican Church of England school, granted him, the Baptist who turned his back on the Church of England, an honorary degree. Lumbering, mining, and shipbuilding were the main industries along this coast. And of course, they were linked because if you wanted to move your minerals from the mines and ship them somewhere, you needed ships, and thus the shipbuilding industry, and you needed the lumber to build those ships. Walton was one of many ports along this coast that had a shipbuilding industry. The Walton shipyard was first opened by Francis Parker in 1855. He had built a bark at the yard along with a number of smaller ships. The largest ship to be built in Walton was the 1,197-ton D.H. Morris in 1876. Nothing else ever built there came close to that size. The last ship was the Brigantine Georgie, built in 1881, closing out the age of shipbuilding for Walton. The reasons for building ships were often linked to the port itself. Across the bay in Chignecto, area ships were built to export lumber from the booming forest industry there. In Walton, ships were mostly built for the export of minerals and pulpwood. So just before I get to the story of the Walton shipyard, I want to take a moment and talk about these caves. You've seen them all the way along the coast as I've been doing this hike. And they're really amazing. And the way they're formed is the ocean finds a small weakness in the rock, if you will, a bit of sand or a crack. And over time, it just becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. And this is what you end up with. Over time, some of these will collapse as they become too big and they're not structurally sound anymore. But they certainly make for a dramatic coastline. The first sawmill to be opened in Walton was in 1837 by Francis Parker, the same Francis Parker who opened the Walton shipyard. It was fairly common in those days for sawmill owners to also operate shipyards. Of course, ships were built of wood. His sawmill used tidal power to turn a water wheel. Another mill, owned by John Campbell, was said to have produced 17,000 board feet of lumber per day, which was shipped out of Walton Harbor. Over the years, there have been many other mills in the area. A hemlock bark mill operated in the west starting in 1890 to extract tannin from the bark for leather tanning. The Nova Scotia Lumber Company operated a steam mill in the early 1900s where they cut lumber for wharf building that was used in places like New York and Boston. That mill was destroyed by fire in 1924. Other mills shipped lumber as far away as England. Sawmills all along the coast from Walton to Tennycape, where I'm headed, and on to Knoll, all ship their products out of Walton Harbor. The last sawmill to operate in Walton was owned by the Parsons family, and it ran from 1946 until 1958. It was an electric mill. It served mostly local clients, so it didn't use the harbor for export. Lumbering is actually still very important in this area. Although these days, the product is shipped by road to the many sawmills and pulp mills around the province. Another important industry here, one that has been important since the time of the early Europeans, right up to the modern day, mining. The story of the mines of this coast, as well as a grisly story from Tennycape, after the break. I'm on the floor of the Bay of Fundy, and it is exactly low tide right now. The tide is going to start coming in, and I'm making my way from Walton to Tennycape. And there's certainly enough time now for me to make it to Tennycape before the water here is above my head. Mining was an important industry all along this coast, going back all the way to the early French and Scottish settlers who mined gypsum to turn into plaster to use in their homes and export to New England. By the late 1800s, mining here included manganese for the use in steel production. But the big producer would be a large barite, lead, zinc, and silver mine that operated between 1941 and 1978. Barite is twice as hard as granite, but it can also be turned into a powder. As such, it has a number of uses. These days, 99% of the barite production in the United States goes into increasing the weight of drilling muds. But it is also used as a pigment in paint and as a filler to increase the weight of products like paper, cloth, and rubber. For example, playing cards have barite packed between the paper fibers to make the cards easier to deal, and mud flaps for large trucks often have barite in them to stop them from blowing in the wind. The Walton barite mine is said to have been the largest and best quality barite mine anywhere in the world. By the 1960s, the mine here accounted for 90% of all Canada's production of that mineral. Barite was first discovered in this area in 1874, but it wasn't until the 1930s when there was a demand for mining supplies in the Caribbean and South America that the mine here really took off. At its height, the Walton mine had 150 people producing 100 tons an hour. In 1970, a flood happened at the mine as a result of a blast placed near a fault zone. At first, it seemed manageable, but over time, the floodwaters became brackish, and in 1976, the mine was being phased out, ultimately closing in 1978. Over 30 years, the mine produced 4.3 million tons of barite, going out as ore, powder, and in bags from a mill on site. But the flooding meant they left 1 million tons still in the ground. The closure of the mine also meant the end of commercial shipping operations in Walton Harbor. The wharf where the barite was shipped from was set ablaze by arson on August 9, 2012. Today, all that remains of the former operations are 2 concrete silos near the harbor. The mine site itself has been all but reclaimed on a hill overlooking the Minas Basin. An interesting aside concerns the Walton mine and involves 2 former occupants of the White House. In 1927, an oil services company by the name of Dresser Industries went public. And very involved in the decision to go public was a member of the executive board, a man by the name of Prescott Bush. He was the grandfather of George W. Bush, the father of George H.W. Bush. In 1949, Dresser acquired the Walton mine, and with it ended up acquiring pretty much control of the worldwide barite market. Their fortunes went through the roof. And with their fortunes going through the roof, so too did the fortunes of the Bush family. I'm closing in on my destination of Tennycape, and it's another place where mining took place. About 8,000 tons of manganese ore were produced along the south shore of the Minas Basin, and over half of it came from what was Canada's largest producer, the Tennycape mine. Manganese, which is used in things like rail lines, rifle barrels, black pottery enamel, and prison bars, was discovered in Tennycape in 1861. The metal was so pure that the material coming out of Tennycape was shown at exhibitions around the world, including the Philadelphia International Exhibition in 1876 and the Paris International Exhibition in 1900. The ore coming from Tennycape was primarily used in glass making. High-quality manganese can be added to glass in small amounts to remove the green tint which results from iron content, or it can be added in large amounts to give the glass a purple color. It's one of the oldest additives to glass, going back at least as far as early Egypt. The ore in this area was used to produce flint glass, which in turn was used to make high-quality lenses and prisms. There is but one more story I want to leave you with before I complete my hike today. A grisly story. The story of the first murder recorded to have been committed in Hants County. On October 22nd, 1902, a 16-year-old peddler by the name of Leon Lundor, or the Little Peddler, was bludgeoned to death for his watch by fellow peddler Sion Azabuli. The two men were passing by, and Azabuli was being sought by local resident Edward Church. Azabuli had cheated Church, getting a revolver from him in exchange for what turned out to be a fake watch. Church came upon Azabuli as he had just killed Lundor. Azabuli is said to have chased Church, who escaped. But the men of the village tracked down Azabuli, and an arrest was made by 3 area men. Azabuli was taken to Windsor, where he was sentenced to death. He was hanged on March 18, 1903 at 4:35 in the morning. Today he is buried in an unmarked grave in Windsor, while his victim, Leon Lundor, is buried at Moose Brook Cemetery. This is what remains of the Tennycape Wharf. I'm sure it is absolutely full of stories, just like the stories I've been able to share with you as I've traveled the coastline from Walton to here. And I've made it here before the tide has come in under a beautiful sunset. There are so many stories on both sides of the Bay of Fundy, and some of those I've shared on previous walkabouts. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow once asked, "Would you learn the secrets of the sea?" Those who are brave enough comprehend its mysteries. And that is something worth thinking about on this hike and on so many other walkabouts.
Hey, come on, feel the sunshine. Oh, come on, won't you be mine? Hey, come on, feel the sunshine. Oh, come on, won't you be mine? Oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, feel the sunshine. Oh, hey, oh, hey, oh, hey, feel the sunshine.